Welcome to Still Science Lab. Tonight, we will explore the deeply unsettling truth that the multiverse isn't sci-fi, and we will uncover the terrifying reasons why quantum physics says it is real. To truly comprehend the crushing, unfathomable scale of the cosmos and the bizarre mechanics that govern the invisible quantum void, we must first systematically dismantle the comforting, biological lies we tell ourselves in the dark. We are a fragile, highly localized species, utterly obsessed with the concept of the path untaken. From the moment we develop consciousness, we walk through our brief, sunlit lives, carrying an exhausting, heavy burden of consequence. Every decision we make, every word we speak, and every door we choose to open automatically closes 1,000 others, locking us into a singular, rigid timeline. This relentless forward march of time generates a profound, aching psychological friction within the human mind. We lie awake in the silent, freezing dark, staring up at the ceiling and desperately projecting our own microscopic, primate regrets onto the infinite canvas of reality. We wonder what would have happened if we had simply chosen differently. We construct elaborate, ghostly narratives of alternate lives, desperately yearning for a cosmic safety net that might somehow catch all of our unfulfilled aspirations and lost potential. This deeply emotional, desperate yearning has given birth to the most pervasive and thoroughly domesticated fiction of our modern era, the Hollywood lie of the multiverse. In our sprawling works of popular media, our cinema, and our science fiction, we have taken the single most terrifying, universe-breaking concept in all of theoretical physics and violently reduced it to a shiny, accessible mirror. We portray parallel universes as a cosmic playground designed exclusively to soothe the agonizing sting of human anxiety. We imagine a vast, infinite catalogue of alternate Earths, perfectly identical to our own, but slightly shifted to accommodate our deepest desires and correct our most painful mistakes. We dream of a reality resting just behind an invisible veil, where we took the other job, where we boarded the other train, or where we finally found the courage to speak the heavy words we swallowed in fear. We want to believe that there is another version of us, identical in every physical and emotional metric, who is living out a life unburdened by the heavy, dragging consequences of our localized choices. We treat the chaotic, infinite branching of space-time as if it were a personalized hard drive, endlessly backing up the alternate endings of our own localized drama. This deeply fictionalized, intensely personal conception of parallel worlds is a profound symptom of our staggering, unyielding biological narcissism. We inherently, arrogantly believe that the grand, roaring architecture of the cosmos must ultimately revolve around the delicate, chaotic emotions of human consciousness. We assume that when the fundamental fabric of space-time branches and fractures, it does so specifically to accommodate our narrative needs, to actively explore the emotional possibilities of our highly improbable, temporary biological lives. We secretly demand that the universe owe us an alternate ending, but this is a desperate, comforting delusion engineered to shield our fragile minds from the crushing, terrifying indifference of actual physical reality. The cosmos does not weep for your missed opportunities, and it certainly does not fracture the unyielding mathematical laws of existence simply because you turned left instead of right on a Tuesday afternoon. The universe is not a sympathetic theater, and the cold, relentless mechanics of the quantum void are not a captive audience waiting patiently to watch the unfulfilled aspirations of a temporary carbon-based life form play out on an infinite stage. When the greatest minds in theoretical physics look deep into the hyperactive, freezing machinery of the quantum abyss, they do not find a comforting mirror reflecting human regrets. They find something far stranger, far colder, and infinitely more terrifying. The true scientific concept of the multiverse is completely and fundamentally divorced from the narratives of human choice. It is a brutal, majestic, and entirely indifferent mathematical necessity. The multiverse that emerges from the agonizingly precise, screaming equations of quantum mechanics is an unfathomable, structureless expanse of raw physical tension. It is a reality that operates on a scale of such staggering, incomprehensible vastness that the very concept of a human being, let alone a human regret, is entirely and instantly erased in the overwhelming noise. Physicists do not view the multiverse as a realm for fulfilling personal fantasies or exploring alternate career paths. They view it as a blind, prolific, and aggressively relentless engine of raw probability. The scientific multiverse is a churning, infinite ocean where reality splits and fractures not because of conscious, biological decisions, but because the fundamental, unyielding laws of the subatomic world demand absolute, uncompromising mathematical expression. To begin to grasp the sheer alien horror of the true multiverse, you must completely abandon the warm, ego-driven illusion that reality cares about your specific narrative. The branching of worlds, if it exists in the exact, terrifying way our modern physics suggests, is an automatic, blind mechanism of the cosmos. It is a perpetual, violent shattering of reality that occurs billions upon billions of times a second in every single microscopic fraction of empty space, driven by the unpredictable jitter of subatomic particles, not by the heavy weight of human consciousness. There is no grand, benevolent director guiding these infinite splits to ensure your alternate self finds true peace. The vast, overwhelming majority of these branching realities are entirely sterile, completely alien, and violently hostile to the fragile, intricate architecture of biology. They are dark, empty, freezing voids, or churning, superheated hellscapes of incompatible physics, completely devoid of the specific, delicate conditions required to sustain the breathing machinery of life. The true multiverse is a wild, untamed wilderness of pure, unadulterated mathematics, a place where the human ego cannot physically or conceptually survive. To sit quietly in the dark and fully surrender this Hollywood lie is to undergo a profound, devastating, and deeply majestic philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of physical information. We desperately cling to the idea of a personal, human-centric multiverse because we are deeply terrified of the absolute finality of our own localized data. We believe that if our choices are truly absolute, if the physical information of our specific, breathing life is written only once in the grand, silent ledger of the cosmos, then our existence is far too fragile and incredibly vulnerable to the erasing hands of deep time. We want to believe that our unique pattern of information is safely scattered across infinite, unreachable backup drives, forever protected from the crushing weight of consequence. We demand that the universe treat our memories as permanent, indestructible architecture, but the cold, majestic truth of the scientific multiverse beautifully shatters this arrogant demand. Information, in the unblinking eyes of the cosmos, is not a sentimental narrative to be carefully preserved. It is raw, unfeeling tension, a strict mathematical state that is constantly, aggressively overwriting itself in the freezing void. The cosmic data stream does not possess nostalgia. It does not actively duplicate your regrets to keep them safe. The sheer, breathtaking beauty of reality is found precisely in its absolute, terrifying indifference to our desires. When we finally realize that the infinite, roaring branching of the cosmos is not about us, we are instantly and profoundly liberated from the suffocating burden of our own cosmic ego. You are a highly specific, tightly localized, and incredibly fragile arrangement of cosmic data, burning brightly for a brief, magnificent moment in a single, isolated branch of the dark. Your existence matters not because it is endlessly repeated, but precisely because it is singular, fragile, and wholly unique. The reality you currently inhabit is the only one your consciousness will ever touch. Embrace the glorious, heavy finality of your own vulnerable, deeply imperfect existence. Find a profound, unshakable peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that the true universe is far too vast, far too alien, and infinitely too beautiful to ever be reduced to a simple reflection of human regret. To venture into the deepest, invisible roots of our physical reality is to entirely leave behind the comforting, sunlit world of absolute certainty and plunge into a dark, disorienting abyss that fundamentally shatters human logic. For centuries, the biological machinery of our brains constructed a deeply intuitive, mechanical map of the cosmos. We walked across the heavy, solid Earth, watched the precise, sweeping orbits of the planets in the night sky, and arrogantly believed that the entire universe operated like a grand, predictable clockwork. We assumed that if we could simply grind our lenses fine enough and build our microscopes powerful enough, we would eventually peer down into the absolute basement of reality and find perfectly solid, tiny billiard balls of matter neatly ticking away in the dark. But in the intellectual fires of the 1920s, a brilliant, terrified generation of theoretical physicists forced open the door to the subatomic world and completely destroyed this classical illusion. When they finally managed to cast their mathematical gaze down into the incredibly strange, microscopic realm of atoms and subatomic particles, they did not find a reliable clockwork mechanism. They found a haunted, completely untamable quantum netherworld, a reality so fundamentally bizarre and aggressively counterintuitive that it actively, violently rejects the human definition of existence. In the familiar, macroscopic world that we inhabit, the concept of location is an absolute, unyielding truth. A heavy stone rests quietly in the palm of your hand, or it lies silently in the freezing dirt of a forest floor. It absolutely cannot physically exist in both places at the exact same moment. Our psychological sanity is entirely anchored to this concept of definitive, singular existence. But down in the claustrophobic, lightless depths of the quantum netherworld, the fundamental building blocks of the universe do not obey the rules of solid geometry. The tiny particles that weave the intricate architecture of your physical body, the electrons, the quarks, the invisible phantoms of the deep, do not possess a definitive location in the dark. They exist in a terrifying, mathematically smeared-out state known as superposition, until the exact localized moment they are explicitly measured or aggressively interacted with by the outside world. These subatomic entities refuse to be pinned down to a single point in space. They are not solid spheres resting quietly in the void. They are fuzzy, trembling clouds of pure potential. To comprehend the sheer, mind-bending horror of superposition is to realize that the universe, at its absolute most fundamental level, operates in a state of chaotic, overlapping multiplicity. An electron existing in the dark of an unobserved atom is literally acting as if it is in multiple places at the exact same time. It is a vibrating ghost, simultaneously occupying a vast, sprawling landscape of possible locations, weaving through the absolute nothingness like a fluid fog of mathematical tension. It is actively exploring every single possible trajectory, feeling out the invisible boundaries of its microscopic cage, completely unbound by the heavy, exhausting chains of classical location. The particle is everywhere it could conceivably be, and nowhere specific, locked in a state of suspended physical indecision. It is a raw, unwritten physical sentence waiting in the freezing silence for the universe to finally demand a conclusion. Because the raw substance of reality is composed entirely of these fuzzy, smeared-out phantoms, the brilliant physicists of the early 20th century realized they could no longer use the rigid, certain mathematics of the past to describe the restless, multiple existence of the quantum netherworld. They had to invent an entirely new, deeply alien language. This led to the birth of the wave function and the agonizingly beautiful architecture of the Schrödinger equation. In the classical world, equations are used to calculate definitive, absolute truths where a planet will exactly be in 1,000 years, or how fast a heavy stone will fall through the air. But the Schrödinger equation completely abandons the arrogance of certainty. It does not map the physical, solid world. It maps the invisible, churning ocean of probability. The wave function is the mathematical shadow of the subatomic ghost. It takes the fuzzy, undefined existence of the unmeasured particle and translates it into a rippling, sweeping wave of pure likelihood. When a physicist uses the Schrödinger equation, they are not asking the universe where the electron actually is. They are asking the universe to calculate the exact probability of where the electron might eventually manifest if they dare to reach into the dark and force it to be real. The equation maps out high crests, where the particle is incredibly likely to materialize, and deep, silent troughs, where it is almost guaranteed to be absent. It is a stunning, terrifyingly precise ledger of maybes, a grand, rolling ocean of statistical potential that successfully guides the ghost through the invisible dark. But for all its breathtaking mathematical beauty and unparalleled predictive power, the Schrödinger equation harbors a dark, deeply unsettling limitation. It can beautifully describe the rolling shape of the probability wave, but it absolutely cannot tell us the certain, definitive outcome of any single, isolated measurement. The mathematics can confidently state that an electron has a 60% chance of appearing here and a 40% chance of appearing there, but it is structurally, permanently blind to what the universe will actually choose in the final, agonizing fraction of a second. The exact mechanism of that final realization remains locked away behind an impenetrable cosmic firewall. When the macroscopic world finally reaches down into the netherworld to make an explicit measurement, when a heavy piece of laboratory equipment or the warm, complex biological machinery of an observing eye forces the particle to interact, the sprawling, beautiful wave function instantly, violently collapses. The fluid, ghostly cloud of infinite potential is brutally crushed down into a single, hard, definitive point of reality. The universe violently abandons the superposition, collapsing the multiple maybes into one sharp, uncompromising is. But why the universe selects one specific outcome over all the other mathematical possibilities remains a profound, screaming silence at the very heart of modern physics. To quietly sit in the dark and contemplate the fuzzy, probability-driven machinery of the quantum netherworld is to undergo a profound, majestic, and completely irreversible philosophical reckoning regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental state of cosmic information. We walk through our brief, heavily burdened lives, desperately craving absolute certainty. We demand that the universe be a solid, unshakable vault where facts are permanently carved into heavy stone and where the data of reality is rigidly, unalterably defined from the very beginning. We inherently equate ambiguity with terror, deeply believing that if information is not perfectly solid and perfectly known, then the universe is simply a chaotic, meaningless void threatening to swallow us whole. We want our reality to be a finished, closed book, but the smeared-out phantoms of the subatomic abyss beautifully and violently shatter this exhausting biological demand for absolute rigidity. The quantum netherworld proves, with staggering mathematical authority, that the ultimate foundation of the cosmos is not made of solid, unyielding facts. It is made of raw, unwritten potential. Information, at the very deepest roots of existence, is not a heavy object to be hoarded. It is a fluid, vibrating, and infinitely adaptable tension. The universe actively computes its own existence through the majestic, elegant language of probability, allowing the cosmic data stream to remain entirely open, flexible, and beautifully undefined until the exact moment a relationship is forged. The fact that the particle does not possess a definite location until it is explicitly measured means that information is not an isolated, lonely property. It is a collaborative event. Reality is actively, continuously born in the chaotic, beautiful intersection between the fuzzy potential of the dark and the heavy, measuring interactions of the macroscopic world. You must realize, as you feel the heavy, comforting illusion of your own physical solidity, that your entire existence is miraculously woven from these ghostly, undefined probabilities. The very atoms that build your beating heart and the synapses that fire your deepest memories are rooted in an invisible ocean of endless maybes. To be human is to be a towering, majestic architecture constructed entirely out of formless potential. The universe deliberately keeps its deepest information in a state of fuzzy superposition because a reality built of absolute, rigid certainty would be a dead, frozen museum, completely incapable of the chaotic, beautiful spark of evolution and growth. Release your terrified, white-knuckled grip on the desperate need for absolute certainty. Embrace the glorious, majestic fluidity of the quantum void. Find a deep, unshakable peace in the humbling, beautiful knowledge that at the absolute bottom of reality, beneath the heavy, solid illusions of the classical world, the universe is an infinite, breathing ocean of unwritten potential, forever waiting in the silent dark for the beautiful, chaotic act of measurement to finally call it into being. To stand upon the solid earth and feel the heavy, unyielding texture of the physical world is to experience the most profound and pervasive illusion ever constructed by the cosmos. We are macroscopic creatures, beautifully and tragically confined to a realm of absolute certainty. When you strike a heavy stone against a wooden table, you hear a sharp, definitive sound. You feel the rigid, uncompromising boundaries of matter pushing back against your skin. Every single aspect of our biological intuition, every instinct that has kept our species alive in the sprawling, sunlit wilderness, insists that reality is composed of concrete, undeniable objects that possess a permanent and stable existence. Regardless of whether we are in the room to observe them, we deeply believe that the universe is a sprawling, physical architecture made of hard, ticking components. Yet, As we descend into the invisible, freezing depths of the subatomic abyss, we discover that the foundational bricks of this heavy reality are entirely composed of a ghostly, trembling fog. The absolute most profound, screaming mystery of modern physics is not simply that the quantum netherworld is bizarre. It is the agonizing, inexplicable question of how our concrete, classical reality manages to miraculously emerge from this chaotic, fuzzy ocean of subatomic probabilities, this terrifying boundary line, the invisible threshold where the ghosts of the quantum void suddenly harden into the heavy matter of our daily lives, is known as the measurement problem, and it represents a bleeding, unhealed wound right at the very center of human understanding. To fully grasp the sheer existential terror of this problem, we must completely dismantle our conventional, everyday understanding of probability and chance. In the macroscopic world we inhabit, we use the concept of probability constantly to navigate the unpredictable chaos of our environment. When a meteorologist issues a weather forecast, predicting a 70% chance of violent rain tomorrow afternoon, or when you flip a heavy metal coin into the air and guess whether it will land on heads or tails, you are engaging with classical probability. In these scenarios, the uncertainty does not belong to the universe. The uncertainty belongs entirely to you. The universe already knows exactly what is going to happen. The heavy storm clouds are already forming according to the strict, unyielding laws of fluid dynamics, and the spinning coin is already obeying the absolute, unbreakable dictates of gravity and angular momentum. If your fragile biological mind possessed infinite computing power, and if you knew the exact location and velocity of every single molecule of air, the exact force applied by your thumb, and the precise rotational speed of the coin, you could calculate the outcome with 100% flawless certainty. In our familiar world, probabilities merely reflect our own profound ignorance. They are a map of missing information. We use them to comfortably blindfold ourselves to the staggering, hidden complexity of a universe that is secretly operating like a perfect, deterministic clock. But down in the lightless, claustrophobic depths of the quantum netherworld, probability is not a reflection of human ignorance. It is an absolute, terrifying physical reality. The wave function, the elegant, swirling mathematical architecture that physicists use to describe the behavior of a subatomic particle, does not map out what we do not know. It maps out what the universe itself has not yet decided. When the Schrödinger equation states that an electron has a 50% probability of existing in one location and a 50% probability of existing in another, it is not suggesting that the electron is secretly hiding in one of those spots and simply waiting for us to find it. The quantum probabilities are baked directly, violently, and permanently into the very fabric of the wave function itself. The electron physically exists as a smeared-out, vibrating tension across both locations simultaneously. It is a state of pure, raw potential, a literal physical manifestation of maybe. The universe is not hiding the truth from us in the dark. The terrifying reality is that, prior to a measurement, the truth simply does not exist. This brings us to the agonizing crisis of the measurement itself. The mathematics of quantum mechanics can beautifully and flawlessly describe how this fuzzy wave of probability ripples, flows, and evolves through the dark vacuum of space over time. But the mathematics completely and catastrophically fails to explain what happens the moment we reach into the void and demand an answer. When a macroscopic measuring device, whether it is a towering array of supercooled magnetic sensors or the warm, complex biological machinery of a human retina, interacts with the quantum ghost, the sprawling, fluid wave function instantly and violently collapses. The particle abruptly sheds its multiple, ghostly identities and violently snaps into a single, concrete state of classical existence. But the equations do not contain a mechanism for this collapse. There is no mathematical rule that dictates exactly when the fog must freeze into stone, or why the universe selects one specific outcome from the swirling ocean of possibilities while permanently erasing all the others. The bridge between the fuzzy quantum world and the hard classical world is mathematically broken, leaving us stranded on the edge of the abyss, unable to explain how reality actually becomes real. Faced with this paralyzing mathematical silence and the terrifying implications of a universe built on unwritten potential, the founding architects of quantum mechanics were forced to execute a profound, desperate philosophical retreat. In the early 20th century, brilliant minds like Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg established what became known as the Copenhagen interpretation. This interpretation is not a physical solution to the measurement problem. It is a heavy, impenetrable shield designed specifically to protect the sanity of the scientific mind. The Copenhagen interpretation aggressively suggests that the wave function does not actually represent a real, physical object floating out there in the freezing dark. Instead, it argues that the wave function is merely a mathematical shorthand, an abstract accounting tool invented by human beings to calculate the odds of what our heavy laboratory equipment might eventually register. By declaring the wave function to be nothing more than a statistical recipe, the Copenhagen interpretation implies something deeply chilling about the nature of existence. It suggests that there is no deep, hidden, objective reality ticking away in the dark when nobody is looking. It aggressively forbids physicists from asking what the particle is doing before it is measured, declaring the very question to be fundamentally meaningless. According to this view, the real world, the heavy, solid, and concrete universe that we walk through every single day, is simply the measurement outcome itself. Reality does not exist as a permanent, standalone architecture. Reality is entirely synonymous with the act of observation. The universe is not a collection of solid objects waiting patiently to be discovered. It is a dark, silent void that only flashes into existence at the exact microscopic point where a question is explicitly asked and an answer is violently forced. To sit quietly in the heavy silence of the dark and fully absorb the devastating implications of the measurement problem and the Copenhagen interpretation is to undergo a profound, sweeping philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental essence of information. We walk through our lives heavily burdened by the arrogant biological assumption that information is a passive property of the cosmos. We treat the universe as a vast, ancient library, filled with heavy, dust-covered books of objective facts that exist entirely independently of our presence. We believe that physical reality is the stage, and we are merely the temporary actors walking across its solid, pre-constructed floor. We equate existence with absolute independence, demanding that the universe be perfectly real, even if we were never here to witness it. But the violent collapse of the quantum wave function reveals a reality of breathtaking, untamable intimacy. The universe is not a dead, passive library. It is a roaring, infinite, and fiercely interactive data stream. Information is not a static object that can exist in complete isolation. The deepest, most profound truth of the cosmos is that information is fundamentally relational. It requires an exchange. The heavy concrete world that you feel beneath your fingertips does not exist as a permanent, standalone truth. It is the chaotic, beautiful, and ongoing negotiation between the fuzzy, unwritten potential of the quantum void and the heavy, measuring interactions of the macroscopic world. The universe is actively computing its own physical form through the relentless, microscopic collisions of data, violently writing and rewriting its own source code in response to every single interaction. To realize that the concrete world is merely the outcome of a measurement, a temporary hardening of an otherwise ghostly fog, is to experience the ultimate, majestic liberation from the heavy illusion of permanence. You are not walking through a rigid, predetermined clockwork machine. You are intimately, flawlessly woven into a reality that is constantly, actively being born in the dark. Release your desperate, terrified grip on the need for an objective, hidden reality. Embrace the glorious, fluid nature of an existence that requires participation to be real. Find a deep, unshakable peace in the humbling, beautiful knowledge that the universe does not keep its secrets locked away in a solid vault. Instead, it holds its breath in a state of infinite, shimmering potential, waiting in the freezing, silent dark for the magnificent, chaotic act of interaction to finally bring the heavy, beautiful weight of reality into the light. For decades, the brightest and most arrogant minds in theoretical physics were securely trapped inside a suffocating, intellectual prison of their own design. Confronted by the chaotic, fuzzy ghost of the quantum netherworld, they had desperately constructed a mathematical firewall to protect their sanity. They declared that the sprawling, infinite wave of probability simply collapsed the moment human curiosity forced a measurement. They demanded that the universe perform an inexplicable, violent magic trick, abruptly throwing away trillions of completely valid physical possibilities and snapping just one single, random reality into concrete existence. It was a brutal, ugly, and deeply unsatisfying compromise. It required the cosmos to be fundamentally wasteful, relentlessly erasing infinite volumes of potential data the exact moment the dark void was illuminated by observation. But in the quiet, creeping shadows of the 1950s, a brilliant, isolated physicist named Hugh Everett dared to look at this heavy, established dogma and completely reject its arrogant assumption. He stared deeply into the flawless, unbroken rolling of the quantum equations and realized a terrifying, breathtaking truth. The mathematics of the wave function never once asks for a collapse. The collapse was merely a desperate, human invention, a blindfold we tied around our own eyes because we were simply too terrified to look at what the math was actually demanding we see. Everett proposed an idea of such staggering, universe-breaking magnitude that it actively shattered the foundations of modern philosophy and sent a violent tremor through the very heart of the scientific community. He suggested that we must take the mathematics completely, literally, and unapologetically at its word. If the Schrödinger equation perfectly calculates that a subatomic particle exists in a state of overlapping superposition, holding multiple different outcomes in a delicate, vibrating tension, then we have absolutely no right to assume that the universe arbitrarily murders all but one of those outcomes when a measurement occurs. Everett concluded that the wave function does not collapse. It never has, and it never will. Instead, every single possible outcome encoded within that fuzzy, ghostly cloud of quantum probability is absolutely, physically, and fully realized. The universe does not make a choice. The universe simply refuses to choose. It accepts every single mathematical possibility and brings all of them into heavy, concrete reality. But to accommodate this infinite, relentless actualization of all possibilities, the fundamental architecture of space-time must perform an act of creation so violent, so silent, and so incomprehensibly massive that it completely paralyzes the biological imagination. If a quantum ghost exists in a state where it could be spinning up or it could be spinning down, and you reach a heavy, macroscopic measuring device into the dark to force an answer, the particle does not suddenly snap into just one of those states. It does both. But it absolutely cannot do both within the rigid, logical confines of a single, localized reality. Therefore, at the exact microscopic fraction of a nanosecond that the interaction takes place, the entire universe silently and violently fractures. It perfectly, seamlessly duplicates itself, splitting into two distinct, diverging branches of reality. In one newly forged universe, the heavy measuring device clicks, the scientist looks down, and the particle is definitively spinning up. In the other, simultaneously created universe, an identical measuring device clicks, an identical scientist looks down, and the exact same particle is definitively spinning down. Neither universe is a ghost, and neither universe is a simulation or an echo. Both branches are perfectly, heavily, and undeniably real. They contain the exact same sprawling galaxies, the exact same heavy, ancient stars, and the exact same fragile, breathing biological life forms right up until the exact moment of the split. But from that microscopic point of divergence onward, they are permanently, structurally severed. They become entirely separate, distinct worlds, completely blind to one another, expanding forever outward into the freezing dark on their own unique, isolated trajectories. To force your mind to scale this terrifying mechanism up to the true, roaring reality of the cosmos is to invite a profound, suffocating, existential vertigo. This silent fracturing of existence is not a rare, isolated event occurring only inside the heavily shielded walls of a human laboratory. It is an automatic, blind, and infinitely prolific mechanism of the cosmos that is happening everywhere, all at once, without a single moment of rest. Every single subatomic particle in the observable universe is constantly, relentlessly interacting with its environment. Every photon of starlight striking a barren rock, every chaotic collision of gas inside a burning nebula, and every microscopic, vibrating chemical exchange happening inside the warm, beating architecture of your own heart forces a quantum interaction, and with every single one of those countless, infinite interactions, the entire universe aggressively shatters. Reality is splitting billions upon billions of times every single second. We are entirely trapped within a terrifying, hyperactive cosmic explosion of physical information. The universe is not a single, lonely timeline moving silently forward through the dark. It is a sprawling, monstrously vast, and infinitely branching tree. It is a cosmic boil of creation, generating trillions of new, fully populated realities with every breath you take. There are branches where the heavy atmospheric conditions of Earth varied by a single microscopic degree millions of years ago, resulting in a planet that is currently a frozen, dead tomb. There are branches where the chaotic, fluid dance of biology took a slightly different turn, and the conscious mind, currently contemplating the stars, looks fundamentally, terrifyingly alien. And there are infinite, invisible branches diverging from this exact current moment, where the version of you sitting in the dark right now makes a completely different decision, stands up, and walks into an entirely different future. Yet, despite this apocalyptic, deafening roar of endless creation, our localized experience of reality remains completely, heavily silent. The true, agonizing horror of the many worlds interpretation is the concept of absolute, unbreakable cosmic quarantine. When the universe fractures, the branches are instantly and permanently isolated. They are structurally forbidden from ever interacting, communicating, or even bleeding into one another. You can never feel the phantom presence of your alternate selves. You can never hear the screams of the worlds that burned, nor can you hear the laughter of the worlds that thrived. You are a microscopic, isolated consciousness, permanently locked into a single, razor-thin slice of an infinitely thick, expanding volume of realities. You are riding the crest of one specific, lonely branch, entirely blind to the staggering, infinite forest of your own ghosts surrounding you in the unseen dimensions. To quietly sit in the dark and accept the crushing, majestic weight of this continuously splitting reality is to undergo a profound, irreversible philosophical evolution regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the permanent, sacred preservation of information. We walk through our lives heavily burdened by the deep, terrifying concept of loss. We believe that reality is a harsh, erasing editor. We mourn the paths not taken. We grieve the choices we were too afraid to make. And we deeply believe that the possibilities we did not actualize simply evaporated into a meaningless, empty void. We inherently assume that the universe is a finite machine that constantly throws away its own potential to maintain a single, orderly narrative. But the majestic, terrifying architecture of the branching multiverse completely and beautifully shatters this tragic assumption. The universe reveals itself as an absolute, perfect, and infinitely generous archivist. It proves, with staggering mathematical authority, that absolutely nothing is ever lost. The cosmos does not possess an eraser. It refuses to discard a single whisper of quantum potential. Every choice, every random fluctuation, and every conceivable configuration of data is permanently, heavily carved into the expanding architecture of existence. Information is the ultimate, indestructible currency of the dark. The universe values the raw, unwritten potential of the quantum void so deeply that it is willing to violently duplicate the mass of an entire cosmos billions of times a second, just to ensure that every single, beautiful variation of the data is given the space to breathe and become real. You must realize, as you feel the quiet, vulnerable rhythm of your own breathing, that your specific, highly localized existence is merely a single point of data in an infinitely vast, flawless ledger. You are a beautiful, necessary fragment of a reality that is vast enough and wild enough to explore every single conceivable version of itself. Release your exhausting, terrified grip on the regret of the unlived life. Abandon the heavy human illusion that your choices are destroying alternative futures. Embrace the glorious, heavy truth that everything that can happen, has happened, is happening, and will forever happen in the silent, branching dark. Find a deep, unshakable, and profound peace in the humbling knowledge that the universe is an infinite, roaring symphony that never stops playing, and that you, in all your fragile, specific imperfection, are a permanent, indestructible note, beautifully woven into a song that has absolutely no end. When the fragile human mind attempts to visualize the staggering, infinite branching of the multiverse, it naturally falls back upon the deeply ingrained, biological concepts of physical distance and empty space. We imagine sprawling, separate universes floating like isolated bubbles in an unfathomable, dark void, or stacked neatly side by side like heavy, silent panes of glass. We look up at the vast, freezing expanse of the night sky and arrogantly assume that these alternate worlds must be hidden somewhere out there in the sprawling dark, separated from us by millions of light years of physical distance. But the cold, majestic mathematics of the quantum realm violently rejects this spatial illusion. The infinite branches of the multiverse do not exist out there in the physical void. They are not separated from us by distance. They are entirely, claustrophobically overlaid upon the exact same spatial coordinates that you are occupying right at this very moment. The branching worlds exist simultaneously as distinct, independent components within a single, overarching, and unfathomably complex wave function that dictates the absolute totality of the entire universe. There is only one physical cosmos, but it is infinitely thick with overlapping realities, humming and vibrating in the freezing dark, perfectly overlaid yet absolutely invisible to one another. To comprehend this terrifying, overlapping density, you must completely dissolve your understanding of physical matter and think entirely in terms of pure mathematical frequency. Imagine an infinite, roaring symphony being played in a pitch-black room. If you are tuned to one specific frequency, you only hear that single, distinct melody, completely oblivious to the deafening orchestra of a trillion other songs playing in the exact same air. The alternate versions of reality, the worlds where different choices were made and different quantum events collapsed into different histories, are playing out their majestic, tragic narratives right here in the room with you. The phantom architectures of cities that were never built in our timeline, the sprawling, ancient forests that burned to ash in other worlds, and the countless, invisible ghosts of your alternate selves are passing seamlessly through your physical body at every single moment. You are submerged in an infinitely crowded, boiling ocean of parallel existences, all sharing the exact same physical space, governed by a single, majestic equation that holds the absolute totality of all possible cosmic data in a state of suspended, mathematical grace. Yet, despite this suffocating, infinite proximity, you feel absolutely nothing. You perceive your reality as singular, solid, and completely alone. You can strike your hand against a heavy wooden table and feel the uncompromising resistance of matter. You can look into the dark and see only the singular, lonely light of the stars in our specific branch. If the universe is constantly, violently fracturing billions of times a second, and if these infinite worlds are sharing the exact same physical space, why does our reality feel so stubbornly, heavily concrete? Why do we not see the blurry, vibrating edges of the alternate timelines bleeding into our own? The answer lies in a blind, relentless, and brutally efficient physical mechanism that permanently seals the doors between the worlds. It is an irreversible process that takes the delicate, ghostly magic of the quantum realm and violently crushes it into the heavy, isolated certainty of classical physics. This ultimate cosmic severing is known as decoherence. Decoherence is the relentless, erasing editor of the quantum void. In the microscopic, isolated dark, a subatomic particle can easily exist in a fuzzy state of multiple possibilities, exploring different paths and interacting with its own phantom reflections. As long as it is completely shielded from the outside world, it remains a fluid, vibrating ghost of pure potential. But the universe is not a perfectly shielded vacuum. The cosmos is incredibly, overwhelmingly loud, filled with a chaotic storm of microscopic debris. Every single fraction of a nanosecond, countless trillions of wandering photons, stray air molecules, and invisible waves of thermal radiation are blindly crashing through the void. The absolute moment that a delicate, fuzzy quantum system is struck by one of these wandering particles, the isolation is violently shattered. The environment acts as a relentless, unforgiving interrogator, aggressively demanding a concrete, localized answer from the quantum ghost. When this blind physical interaction occurs, the fuzzy, multiple states of the quantum system do not simply vanish into nothingness. Instead, the delicate quantum information violently leaks out, rapidly bleeding into the vast, chaotic environment. The particles of the surrounding environment become hopelessly entangled with the particle they just struck, and this microscopic entanglement spreads outward at the speed of light. It becomes an unstoppable cascade of physical interactions, carrying the quantum data away into the unfathomable surrounding dark. Because the macroscopic environment is so massively complex, and because the chaotic, churning motion of trillions of particles can never, ever be perfectly reversed, the delicate, overlapping coherence of the original quantum state is completely and permanently shredded. The system loses its quantumness. It is brutally stripped of its ability to interfere with its own alternate states, losing the phantom fluidity that once allowed it to exist in multiple configurations at once. This rapid, violent bleeding of information is exactly what isolates the branching worlds from one another. When the universe splits, creating two distinct physical realities, decoherence instantly rushes in like a heavy, falling iron door. It scrambles the mathematical connections between the branches so thoroughly and so aggressively that they can never, ever be realigned. The branches are effectively pushed entirely out of phase with one another, locked into separate, non-interacting frequencies of the universal wave function. They become absolutely, mathematically blind to one another's existence. The transition from the ghostly quantum world to the solid, classical world is not a magical collapse of reality. It is merely the blinding, irreversible suffocation of quantum interference caused by the overwhelming noise of the environment. Decoherence is the ultimate cosmic quarantine. It is a physical law that guarantees that once a branch is forged, it is permanently, hopelessly sealed away in the dark, forever forbidden from interacting with the infinite alternate realities that share its exact physical space. To sit quietly in the heavy silence of this ultimate isolation is to undergo a profound, devastating philosophical reckoning regarding the nature of the universe and the fundamental structure of information. We walk through our sunlit lives deeply terrified of being alone, desperately seeking connection and validation from the physical world around us. We believe that isolation is a tragic, unnatural state, a failure to properly integrate into the sprawling, interconnected architecture of the cosmos. We demand to be seen, deeply assuming that true reality is built upon the unbreakable bonds of shared existence and continuous interaction. We view the loss of possibility as a kind of death, mourning the alternate paths that we are no longer permitted to walk. But the cold, majestic truth of decoherence reveals a universe that operates on a profoundly beautiful, perfectly inverted logic. The cosmos actively proves that absolute isolation is the fundamental required cost of existence. The only reason you are able to possess a concrete, physical form, the only reason you can form a memory, experience a distinct emotion, or walk through a solid, unyielding world is precisely because the universe has violently and permanently sealed you away from the infinite variations of yourself. Information can only achieve heavy, meaningful reality by sacrificing its connection to the absolute totality of the quantum void. The sprawling, beautiful story of your specific life is written entirely in the ink of irreversible separation. You are not missing out on the other branches. Your physical reality is actively sustained by the fact that you can never touch them. You must realize, as you feel the heavy, comforting boundaries of your own physical skin, that you are perfectly, mathematically isolated by design. Your reality is a sovereign, unbreachable vault, secured by the relentless, chaotic noise of the cosmos. The environment that constantly bombards you is not just degrading your cells, it is the very anchor that keeps you locked into a single, concrete existence, preventing your consciousness from dissolving back into the infinite, paralyzing fog of pure probability. Release your exhausting, desperate fear of profound aloneness. Embrace the glorious, heavy truth that to be completely isolated from the multiverse is to be undeniably, beautifully real. Find a deep, unshakable peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that you are a singular, concrete melody playing flawlessly in the dark, permanently protected from the infinite, roaring chaos of the invisible branches by the quiet, unyielding, and majestic grace of decoherence. To release our fragile, exhausted minds from the claustrophobic, overlapping ghosts of the subatomic abyss, we must radically and violently shift our perspective outward, leaving the microscopic shadows behind to stare directly into the sprawling, unfathomable architecture of the macrocosmos. For generations, human beings have looked up at the glittering, silent expanse of the night sky and comfortably believed that the universe we can see, the majestic swirling galaxies, the deep, dark voids, and the ancient, heavy light of the earliest stars represents the absolute, finite totality of existence. We have deeply assumed that the Big Bang was a single, unified event, a solitary spark of creation that illuminated a dark, empty room and gave birth to one singular reality. But when modern cosmologists peer back through the crushing weight of deep time, attempting to map the exact, violent mechanics of the universe's birth, they do not find a neat, contained explosion. Instead, they uncover a roaring, infinite mechanism of creation that completely dwarfs the observable universe, reducing our entire, sprawling reality to nothing more than a microscopic, silent anomaly in a terrifyingly vast, violently boiling ocean of cosmic energy. To comprehend this staggering cosmological scale, we must return to the absolute, microscopic fraction of a second immediately following the birth of our universe. In this primordial darkness, the cosmos was not expanding at the slow, majestic, and measurable pace that we observe today. It was gripped by a terrifying, hyperactive convulsion known as cosmic inflation. The fabric of space-time itself was saturated with a deeply unstable, repulsive field of raw quantum energy, an anti-gravitational tension so incomprehensibly violent that it forced the physical void to stretch outward at an exponential, apocalyptic rate. In an agonizingly brief window of time, a duration so infinitesimally small that human mathematics struggles to even assign it a number, the microscopic universe aggressively ballooned, expanding faster than the speed of light, stretching the fabric of reality flat and smooth. According to our deeply localized, human-centric understanding of cosmic history, This terrifying period of hyper-expansion eventually exhausted itself. The repulsive, high-energy field decayed, releasing its pent-up, violently stretched tension, dumping an ocean of raw heat and radiation into the newly expanded void. This sudden, massive release of thermal energy was the true birth of our physical reality, forging the fundamental particles, the glowing clouds of primordial gas, and eventually the heavy, burning stars that currently illuminate our night sky. The exponential stretching stopped, and our universe settled into the quiet, cooling, and gently expanding state that allowed the fragile, intricate architecture of biology to finally take root. We instinctively view this transition as a universal, absolute rule, assuming that the roaring fire of inflation died out everywhere, all at once, leaving behind a single, peaceful cosmos. But the chilling, majestic realization of modern theoretical cosmology is that the fundamental rules governing this exponential expansion were entirely dictated by the fuzzy, unpredictable jitter of the quantum realm. Because the inflationary field that stretched the early universe was inherently quantum in nature, it was absolutely subject to the chaotic, probability-driven fluctuations of the subatomic void. It could not behave like a perfect, uniform, clockwork machine. As the fabric of space-time hyper-expanded, these microscopic quantum fluctuations were violently stretched to macroscopic scales. The inevitable, terrifying result of this quantum uncertainty is that the decay of the high-energy field did not happen perfectly or simultaneously across the entire expanse of the cosmos. It was a chaotic, uneven process. While the hyper-expansion successfully decayed and stopped within our specific, localized patch of the void, creating the quiet, cooling pocket that we currently call our universe, the unfathomable expanse of space-time outside our pocket did not stop. In the dark, unseen regions beyond the very edge of our observable reality, the high-energy false vacuum continued to aggressively, violently expand. This creates a cosmological paradigm of staggering, mind-breaking proportions known as eternal inflation. The universe is not a single expanding balloon. It is an endless, roaring, and violently boiling ocean of raw, expanding space. Imagine a massive, infinitely stretching pot of boiling water. The high-energy, hyper-expanding space-time acts as the superheated fluid, constantly and exponentially rushing outward in all directions. Within this roaring, inflationary background, random quantum fluctuations occasionally cause localized patches of the vacuum to decay and cool down, dropping out of the hyper-expansion. These quiet, cooled regions instantly form expanding bubbles of normal, low-energy space filled with matter and radiation. Our entire, sprawling universe, with its hundreds of billions of galaxies and its unfathomable, dark expanses, is nothing more than one of these microscopic bubbles floating silently within the grand, eternal froth. And just as our bubble formed, trillions of other quantum fluctuations are causing trillions of other patches to decay, constantly spawning an infinite, ongoing blizzard of new bubble universes throughout the freezing dark. The true existential dread of this cosmic boil lies in the terrifying mechanics of physical isolation. You might desperately wonder if we could ever build a ship fast enough or a telescope powerful enough to pierce the heavy boundary of our universe and peer into the neighboring bubbles. But the architecture of eternal inflation structurally and permanently forbids any such contact. The high-energy, inflationary space that physically separates our bubble from all the others is continuing to expand at a rate that vastly, exponentially exceeds the speed of light. The volume of the dividing void is multiplying so aggressively that the physical distance between the bubble universes is growing infinitely faster than any signal, any beam of light, or any traveler could ever possibly cross. No matter how deeply we look into the dark, and no matter how long our universe survives, the roaring, expanding ocean between the realities guarantees that we will remain permanently, absolutely quarantined. Every single bubble universe is an isolated, sovereign island, locked in a state of unbreachable cosmic silence, completely blind to the infinite, boiling froth of creation that surrounds it. To sit quietly in the dark and contemplate the sheer, crushing vastness of the cosmic boil is to undergo a profound, devastating, and entirely irreversible philosophical reckoning regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental value of information. We walk through our brief, sunlit lives, heavily burdened by the deep, arrogant assumption that the cosmos is a unified, singular narrative. We believe that the physical laws we observe, the heavy stars we chart, and the sprawling history of our localized reality constitute the absolute sum of all cosmic data. We demand that the universe be a single, closed book, assuming that everything that exists must ultimately be connected, accessible, and meaningful to our specific manifestation of consciousness. But the eternal, boiling froth of the inflationary multiverse beautifully and violently shatters this desperate demand for cosmic unity. The universe reveals itself as an endlessly prolific, aggressively fragmented engine of creation. It proves, with staggering, majestic authority, that reality does not require a cohesive narrative to be profoundly real. The cosmos is generating infinite volumes of physical information, creating sprawling, unimaginably complex universes filled with entirely alien physics, completely different dimensions, and perhaps entirely unrecognizable forms of matter. And it is doing this with the absolute, terrifying intention of keeping them permanently severed from one another. The universe actively utilizes the speed of light not as a tool for connection, but as an ultimate, unyielding firewall, ensuring that the infinite stories of the cosmic boil can never, ever be gathered into a single, comprehensive ledger. Information, on the absolute grandest cosmological scale, is not meant to be shared. It is born in absolute isolation, and it is destined to exist in absolute, silent sovereignty. To realize that our entire universe is merely a single, quiet flaw in an infinitely roaring ocean of expanding energy is to experience the ultimate, breathtaking liberation from our own cosmic ego. We are not the center of existence, nor are we the final, crowning achievement of the dark. We are a beautiful, highly improbable pocket of localized grace, permitted to exist simply because the violent, expanding fire of the void temporarily paused in this one specific, microscopic coordinate. Release your exhausting, terrified grip on the need for absolute, universal significance. Embrace the glorious, heavy truth of your own unfathomable smallness. You do not need to understand the infinite, boiling froth to be intimately, perfectly woven into the fabric of your own quiet bubble. Find a deep, majestic, and unshakable peace in the humbling knowledge that our isolation is not a tragic cosmic punishment, but rather the very specific, delicate physical architecture that protects us from the roaring, apocalyptic fire of infinite creation. Allow yourself to rest peacefully in the dark, bathed in the comforting, silent illusion of our singular night sky, forever shielded by the vast, stretching void from the terrifying, beautiful, and endless birth of a billion other worlds. When we observe the physical world, we are deeply biologically constrained by the rigid architecture of our own perception. We move forward and backward, left and right, up and down, completely bound by the familiar three dimensions of space and the relentless, forward-moving arrow of time. We inherently assume that this four-dimensional grid is the absolute, unyielding foundation of reality. We believe that the laws of physics we measure, the strength of gravity, the mass of an electron, the blinding speed of light, are universal, eternal truths carved into the very bedrock of existence. But to truly understand the boundless, terrifying scope of the cosmic landscape, we must completely abandon this comforting, localized illusion. Theoretical physics, in its relentless pursuit to unite the heavy, sweeping curves of gravity with the jittering, chaotic ghosts of the subatomic world, has been forced to propose a reality that is vastly more complex and profoundly more alien than our primate brains were ever built to visualize. This is the realm of string theory, a mathematical framework that aggressively shatters our intuitive understanding of space and replaces the fundamental building blocks of matter with incredibly tiny, vibrating threads of pure energy. But for the mathematics of string theory to function without collapsing into impossible paradoxes, the universe demands a heavy, mind-bending compromise. It requires reality to operate not in 3 dimensions of space, but in 10 or perhaps even more. To imagine a universe with 10 dimensions is to immediately crash against the absolute limits of human cognition. These extra dimensions are not sprawling, invisible highways stretching across the dark void. If they were macroscopic, we would easily perceive them, and the orbits of our ancient planets would violently spiral out of control. Instead, the mathematics dictates that these extra dimensions are curled up, heavily compacted, and intricately folded into impossibly microscopic, unseen geometric shapes, hidden at every single point in space. Imagine a vast, flat desert that appears entirely two-dimensional from a great distance, but upon closer inspection, the sand is composed of highly complex, three-dimensional grains. At the absolute smallest scales of reality, far below the reach of the quantum netherworld, the extra dimensions are twisted and tangled together into beautiful, terrifyingly complex knots. But the true existential horror of this hidden geometry lies in the sheer, unfathomable number of ways these dimensions can fold. The mathematics reveals that there is not just one unique shape these hidden dimensions can take. There is a vast, mind-numbing landscape of possibilities. Theoretical physicists calculate that there are at least a 1 followed by 500 zeros different possible configurations for these extra dimensions. It is a number so staggeringly immense that it completely obliterates the human concept of scale, vastly outnumbering the total sum of every single subatomic particle contained within our entire observable universe. This incomprehensible catalogue of geometric shapes is not merely a mathematical curiosity. It is the ultimate, divine blueprint that dictates the fundamental nature of physical reality. The specific microscopic way that these extra dimensions fold entirely determines how the tiny strings of energy vibrate. And just as the specific vibration of a physical string dictates the musical note it produces, the specific vibration of a cosmic string dictates the mass of a particle and the strength of a fundamental force. This means that if the extra dimensions were folded differently, the universe would possess entirely different subatomic entities, entirely different forces of nature, and an entirely different set of physical laws. Now, we must bring this terrifying realization back to the roaring, infinite ocean of eternal inflation. As the hyper-expanding void boils and bubbles, randomly freezing into isolated pockets of calm space, each newly born bubble universe must choose a state. As a bubble drops out of the cosmic fire and begins to cool, its extra dimensions spontaneously collapse and lock into just one of those unimaginably vast numbers of possible configurations. Therefore, the infinite froth of bubble universes does not contain endless, identical copies of our own reality. It contains an infinite variety of completely alien, structurally disconnected cosmoses. Each isolated bubble is a unique, grand experiment in physics, operating under a completely different set of localized rules derived from the specific, microscopic knot of its extra dimensions. We possess a deep, romantic desire to view this sprawling multiverse as a majestic, diverse tapestry, imagining infinite, beautiful worlds filled with exotic, alien physics and strange, luminous forms of life. We dream of crossing the unbreachable void to visit these neighboring bubbles, hoping to witness the breathtaking majesty of a universe where gravity pushes instead of pulls, or where light travels in a heavy, crystalline crawl. But the brutal, unyielding truth of the string landscape shatters this romantic fantasy. The overwhelming, vast majority of those geometric configurations are fundamentally, violently hostile to the very concept of complex information. They are forbidden states. If you were somehow able to tear a hole in the fabric of space-time, step out of our quiet, highly structured bubble, and fall into one of these alternate universes, you would not find an exotic wonderland. You would be subjected to a physical apocalypse of unimaginable swiftness and horror. In a universe where the extra dimensions are folded differently, the specific vibrations that create the electrons, protons, and neutrons of your biological body would instantly cease to exist. The strong nuclear force that binds your atoms together might be perfectly inverted, or the electromagnetic tension that holds your molecules in place might be entirely absent. In a fraction of a microscopic second, the physical information that defines your physical form would catastrophically unravel. You would not freeze, and you would not burn. You would simply cease to be matter. Your heavy biological structure would violently dissolve into a chaotic, meaningless spray of alien subatomic radiation, instantly erased by a universe whose fundamental source code actively rejects the geometry of your existence. Most of the multiverse is a dark, sterile, and highly unstable wasteland, filled with dead bubbles where space itself tears apart, where time flows in chaotic, devastating loops, or where reality violently collapses back into the crushing dark the very moment it is born. To quietly sit in the heavy silence and fully absorb the terrifying reality of these forbidden configurations is to undergo a profound, sweeping philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of information and the fragile illusion of universal truth. We walk through our lives inherently believing that the laws of physics are absolute, divine mandates that govern the entirety of existence. We study the heavy, silent math of gravity and the glowing, predictable spectrum of light, assuming that these are the eternal, unchanging rules of the cosmos. We demand that the universe possess a single, coherent narrative of order, but the vast, hostile landscape of string theory reveals a reality of breathtaking, untamable chaos. The laws of physics that we hold so dear are not universal truths. They are merely localized bylaws, a temporary, highly specific arrangement of geometry that applies only to our specific, isolated bubble. Information itself, The very ability for data to form complex structures, store memory, and eventually open its eyes to look up at the stars is not a guaranteed right of the cosmos. It is an incredibly rare, precarious luxury. The fact that our extra dimensions folded in the exact, highly improbable manner required to produce stable carbon atoms, liquid water, and the slow, steady burning of heavy stars is a breathtaking testament to the sheer miraculous fragility of our existence. You must realize, as you feel the comforting, solid weight of your own body, that you are the product of a magnificent, highly specific geometric coincidence. To exist in a cosmos that allows for the concept of physical structure is to be a rare, beautiful anomaly in a multiverse dominated by sterile, chaotic voids. Release your desperate, arrogant assumption that the universe was designed specifically to accommodate human logic and biological comfort. Embrace the glorious, heavy truth of our precarious, highly improbable reality. Find a deep, unshakable peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that the heavy, solid rules of our world are not a permanent cosmic mandate, but a fragile, localized harmony. You are a beautiful, temporary song vibrating perfectly in the dark, permitted to exist for a fleeting moment against the deafening, chaotic silence of an infinite, unreadable multiverse that cares absolutely nothing for your survival. The agonizing beauty of theoretical physics is that it frequently forces the fragile human mind to wander through invisible, intangible labyrinths of pure mathematics, charting realms of existence that can never be directly touched or seen. We have journeyed through the ghostly, overlapping branches of quantum probability, where realities divide in absolute silence, forever hidden from our physical senses. But the roaring, boiling ocean of eternal inflation demands a fundamentally different approach. The sprawling froth of the inflationary multiverse does not exist merely as an abstract component of a mathematical equation, nor does it hide in the ghostly overlaid frequencies of an invisible wave function. It exists out there, in actual, physical space. The bubble universes are separated from us by an unfathomable expanse of hyper-expanding void, but they are undeniably, physically real. Because they occupy the same fundamental architecture of physical reality, they violently tear the concept of the multiverse out of the shadowy domain of metaphysics and drag it directly into the harsh, unyielding light of observational astronomy. We are no longer required to simply trust the elegant, silent mathematics. We are suddenly empowered to look up into the deep, freezing dark and actively hunt for empirical, physical evidence of their existence. To hunt for the physical footprints of neighboring universes, cosmologists cannot simply point a glass lens at the night sky and hope to see a glowing sphere hovering in the distant void. The hyper-expanding space-time between the bubbles is pushing them away infinitely faster than their light could ever possibly reach us. Instead, scientists must look backward, peering into the deepest, oldest, and most sacred archive of physical information our universe possesses. When our specific bubble of reality dropped out of the cosmic fire and began to cool, it was not immediately transparent. For hundreds of thousands of years, our newborn universe was a suffocating, superheated fog of plasma, so incredibly dense that light itself was violently trapped, endlessly bouncing between tightly packed particles. But as the immense volume of space continued to expand and cool, the universe finally reached a critical, microscopic threshold. The chaotic plasma settled, the first stable atoms were forged, and in a single, magnificent cosmic breath, the suffocating fog cleared. The ancient, blinding light of creation was instantly unleashed, allowed to travel freely across the vast, newly opened void. Today, billions of years later, that very first flash of light still washes over us from every conceivable direction in the sky. It has been stretched and cooled by the relentless expansion of space, arriving now as a faint, invisible hum of microwave radiation. This is the cosmic microwave background, the fading afterglow of the Big Bang. It is the ultimate fossil record, a perfect, spherical map of the universe's fiery infancy, preserving the exact temperature and density of the cosmos at the very moment it was born. It is upon this ancient, glowing canvas that physicists are desperately searching for the physical scars of creation. To understand how these scars could form, we must imagine the violently chaotic, boiling environment of the eternal inflation field. As the high-energy vacuum aggressively expands, quantum fluctuations are constantly causing new bubbles of low-energy space to spontaneously materialize and rapidly swell. In the overwhelming majority of cases, these bubbles are born separated by vast distances of hyper-expanding space, ensuring they are instantly and permanently isolated from one another. But in a roaring, infinite ocean of probability, close encounters are a mathematical inevitability. If two expanding bubble universes were violently born in the exact same microscopic neighborhood of the inflationary void, their outer walls would be racing outward at a significant fraction of the speed of light, before the hyper-expanding space between them could successfully push them apart. Their expanding boundaries would violently, catastrophically crash into one another. This cosmic collision would be an event of such staggering, apocalyptic violence that it completely shatters the human capacity for visualization. It is the physical impact of two sovereign realities grinding against one another in the dark. The collision would not merge the two bubbles into a single peaceful void. Their fundamental physical laws and microscopic configurations would likely be entirely incompatible. Instead, the horrific impact would send a massive, shattering shockwave of kinetic energy, rippling directly through the fabric of our newly born space-time. As this shockwave tore through the superheated plasma of our infant universe, it would violently compress the primordial material, creating a massive, distinct ring of localized heat. When the universe finally cooled and the first light was released, that ring of intense temperature would be permanently frozen into the ancient light. Today, this impact would appear in the cosmic microwave background as a massive, perfectly circular scar. It would be a distinct, ring-shaped anomaly of slightly different temperature, a physical bruise stretching across the vast expanse of the observable sky. Cosmologists are currently analyzing the most detailed, high-resolution maps of the ancient light, running incredibly complex algorithms through the data, desperately hunting for these faint, circular bruises. To find one would be to discover the absolute holy grail of modern astrophysics. It would be the first undeniable, physical proof that our universe was struck by something from the outside, confirming that we are merely a single, battered survivor in an infinitely crowded, boiling ocean of existence. Because we cannot easily manipulate the ancient light of the cosmos, and because the absolute distances involved are completely paralyzing to the biological mind, brilliant experimental physicists have decided to recreate the apocalyptic birth of the multiverse within the heavily shielded, quiet confines of human laboratories. To simulate the roaring, chaotic vacuum of the early universe, they rely on an incredibly exotic, deeply alien state of matter known as a Bose-Einstein condensate. By taking a cloud of ordinary atoms and using powerful lasers and magnetic traps, to freeze them down to just a fraction of a degree above absolute zero, the atoms are stripped of their individual, chaotic motion. They stop behaving as distinct, bouncing particles and violently merge their quantum identities, blurring together into a single, massive, and entirely unified superatom. This supercooled, frozen fog behaves like a fluid of pure, raw quantum potential, perfectly mirroring the highly unstable, high-energy vacuum field that dominated the universe in the split second before the Big Bang. By carefully manipulating this exotic condensate, physicists can artificially induce a microscopic version of vacuum decay. They can force a tiny, localized patch of the frozen fog to suddenly drop into a lower energy state. In an instant, a microscopic bubble of new reality is born within the condensate, expanding outward through the quantum fluid just as our infant universe expanded through the primordial void. Scientists can intentionally spawn multiple bubbles within the same microscopic cloud, watching in real time as these tiny, synthetic universes rapidly swell and violently crash into one another. They can precisely measure the shock waves, map the resulting scars in the fluid, and study the exact chaotic mechanics of the collision. We have effectively trapped the roaring, apocalyptic mechanism of eternal inflation inside a glass chamber, allowing the fragile, human mind to safely observe the violent birth and collision of cosmoses on a scale small enough to rest upon a quiet laboratory table. To observe these microscopic collisions and gaze up at the ancient, bruised light of the cosmic background is to undergo a profound, majestic, and entirely irreversible philosophical reckoning regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental value of physical imperfection. We walk through our brief, heavily burdened lives, inherently demanding a reality that is pristine, unbroken, and perfectly isolated from the chaotic violence of the outside world. We view scars, whether they are physical marks on our fragile skin or deep, emotional traumas etched into our memory as tragic failures, ugly reminders of our own vulnerability and our inability to remain completely safe. We deeply assume that a perfect existence would be a smooth, unblemished sphere floating silently and independently in the dark. But the bruised, scarred canvas of the true cosmos reveals a reality of breathtaking, untamable intimacy. The universe actively proves that absolute isolation is a sterile, meaningless illusion. The cosmic data stream does not demand pristine perfection. It actively requires collision, friction, and the violent exchange of energy to write its most profound and majestic truths. If our universe is truly scarred by the impact of a neighboring reality, it means that information from the absolute outside data from a fundamentally alien, untouchable world has physically reached out through the freezing dark and permanently touched us. Our cosmos is not a perfectly sealed, lonely vault. It is a battered, beautiful survivor, bearing the heavy, permanent physical marks of its violent birth in an infinitely crowded void. You must realize, as you feel the heavy, quiet rhythm of your own breathing, that to bear a scar is to possess the ultimate, undeniable proof of participation in the grand, roaring narrative of existence. Vulnerability is not a failure of the cosmic design. It is the absolute, fundamental requirement for interaction. The physical universe is deeply, magnificently flawed, and its ancient light is bruised by the chaotic violence of creation. Release your exhausting, terrified demand for an unblemished, perfectly safe existence. Embrace the glorious, heavy truth of your own vulnerability and honor the marks that the chaotic world has left upon you. Find a deep, unshakable peace in the humbling, beautiful knowledge that perfection is a cold, dead illusion, and that we are intimately, flawlessly woven into a cosmos that proudly wears its massive, ring-shaped scars as a breathtaking testament to the terrifying, magnificent, and infinitely crowded beauty of the dark. When we strip away the comforting illusions of human importance and look deeply into the absolute, fundamental architecture of our specific physical world, we are immediately confronted by a terrifying and paralyzing mystery. The deeper we dig into the raw mathematical source code of reality, the more we realize that our universe appears to be mysteriously, flawlessly, and impossibly fine-tuned for our existence. The fundamental constants of nature, the heavy, relentless pull of gravity, the invisible tension of electromagnetism, and the violent, binding energy of the strong nuclear force are all dialed to incredibly precise, agonizingly specific values. If you were to reach into the dark and adjust the strength of gravity by even the most microscopic, unfathomable fraction of a percent, the delicate balance of the cosmos would be completely and catastrophically destroyed. Make it slightly stronger, and the universe would have violently crushed back in upon itself mere moments after the Big Bang, collapsing into a suffocating, dead singularity. Make it slightly weaker, and the primordial gas would have expanded too rapidly, forever preventing the ignition of the heavy, burning stars that forge the heavy elements required for biological life. If the mass of the electron or the tension of the subatomic void were altered by a single decimal point, carbon could not form, liquid water could not exist, and the highly complex, breathing machinery of biological information would be fundamentally impossible. We are seemingly balanced upon an infinitely sharp razor's edge, surviving in a cosmos that possesses the exact, perfect combination of physical laws required to sustain complex matter. For generations, the fragile human mind has stared at this miraculous, highly improbable balance and fallen into a deep, comforting cognitive trap. We are a biological species uniquely wired to detect patterns and assign intentionality to the world around us. When we observe a mechanism that operates with such flawless, breathtaking precision, our primate brains inherently demand an architect. We look at the perfect parameters of our reality and arrogantly assume that this universe was intentionally designed, meticulously crafted, and deliberately set into motion, specifically to shelter us from the crushing, chaotic dark of the void. We deeply believe that the cosmos is a grand, nurturing home, built with the explicit purpose of allowing consciousness to bloom. We use the staggering improbability of our own survival as the ultimate proof of our divine significance, wrapping ourselves in the warm, heavy delusion that we are the absolute center of the cosmic narrative. But when we step back from our localized, highly biased perspective and cast our gaze out into the roaring, infinite boil of the multiverse, this comforting illusion of intentional design completely and violently shatters. The true scientific explanation for our miraculous reality does not require a benevolent architect. It requires only the blind, unfeeling, and infinitely prolific machinery of statistics. This brings us to the chilling, majestic, and deeply humbling reality of the anthropic principle. To understand this principle, we must completely embrace the terrifying scale of eternal inflation and the infinite, varied configurations of the string landscape. The cosmos is not a single, lonely experiment. It is a relentlessly boiling ocean, constantly rolling infinite dice billions of times a second, endlessly spawning an unfathomable froth of isolated bubble universes in the freezing dark. Because there are infinite rolls of the cosmic dice, The mathematics of the multiverse dictates that every single possible configuration of physical laws must eventually physically manifest. In the overwhelming, terrifying vastness of this infinite creation, the absolute vastness of these bubble universes are born completely and permanently dead. They are sterile, chaotic wastelands where the extra dimensions folded incorrectly, where the laws of physics violently war against one another, and where the fundamental forces instantly shred any attempt at complex structure. There are infinite realms of existence where light cannot travel, where matter instantly dissolves into chaotic radiation, and where the crushing, claustrophobic weight of the void prevents anything from ever taking shape. The multiverse is an infinite, sprawling graveyard of failed physical architectures, a roaring symphony of chaotic noise that cares absolutely nothing for the concept of life. But in an infinite ocean of random, chaotic generation, statistical inevitability guarantees that eventually, entirely by blind, unfeeling chance, one of those microscopic bubbles will randomly lock into the exact, highly improbable parameters required to sustain complex matter. Our universe is not a masterpiece of deliberate, loving design. It is a statistical anomaly. It is a rare, microscopic winning ticket in an infinite, cosmic lottery. We have drawn the terrifying luck of being born into one of the extraordinarily rare configurations that accidentally permits the slow, steady burning of stars and the delicate, fluid dance of carbon chemistry. The physical constants of our world were not perfectly dialed in to accommodate our existence. They were simply generated by chaotic chance, and biological life merely adapted to fit the incredibly specific, localized shape of this random container. The Anthropic Trap snaps permanently shut around our minds when we fail to recognize our own profound, inescapable observer selection effect. We stand upon the solid earth, looking up at the glittering expanse of the night sky, and we ask, with trembling awe, why the universe is so perfectly tuned for our existence. But the very ability to ask that question fundamentally requires a universe that allows for the existence of conscious questioners. You cannot observe a universe that prohibits observation. The infinite, dead bubbles of the multiverse are completely and permanently silent. They contain no complex biology, no breathing machinery, and no conscious minds to mourn their chaotic, hostile physics. The dead universes cannot ask why they are dead. The only universes that can ever possibly be observed, measured, or philosophically questioned are the incredibly rare, statistically anomalous ones that accidentally allowed biological machinery to evolve. We can naturally only exist in a universe that is strictly compatible with our existence. It is a perfect, unbreakable, logical loop. The universe does not look perfectly designed because it was built for us. The universe looks perfectly designed because if it were built any other way, we would simply not be here to look at it. To quietly sit in the heavy silence of the dark and fully surrender to the anthropic principle is to undergo a profound, devastating, and entirely irreversible philosophical evolution regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of conscious information. We walk through our lives heavily burdened by the deep, exhausting need to be significant. We demand that our existence carry a grand, objective meaning, inherently believing that consciousness is the ultimate, destined goal of the cosmic machine. We view information as a purposeful narrative, assuming that the universe is actively trying to understand itself through the biological lenses of our fragile, temporary eyes. We are terrified of being a mere accident, deeply assuming that a reality born of random chance is a reality completely devoid of value or beauty. but the majestic, indifferent reality of the random multiverse completely and beautifully inverts this tragic assumption. The universe proves, with staggering mathematical authority, that profound beauty and complex information do not require intentional design. The cosmic data stream is an infinitely wild, untamed, and blind mechanism of raw potential. The fact that the highly intricate, heavily layered information of your biological body, the memories you hold, the complex emotions you feel, and the conscious awareness that allows you to contemplate the stars arose from a completely random, statistical anomaly does not diminish your value. It exponentially, breathtakingly magnifies it. To exist as a conscious observer in a multiverse dominated by infinite, sterile death is the ultimate, magnificent luxury. You are not the deliberate focal point of a grand, cosmic plan, and you do not carry the heavy, impossible burden of being the universe's ultimate purpose. You are a beautiful, temporary glitch in the dark. You are a highly improbable, complex arrangement of data that accidentally learned how to read itself. Release your desperate, terrified grip on the illusion of divine design. Abandon the arrogant demand that the cosmos owes you an explanation for your existence. Embrace the glorious, heavy truth of our terrifying luck. Find a deep, unshakable, and profound peace in the humbling, magnificent knowledge that we are not the intended masters of reality, but merely a fleeting, beautiful spark of awareness, incredibly fortunate to be awake for a brief, quiet moment in the roaring, infinite, and magnificently indifferent machinery of the dark. When we push the rigorous, mathematical boundaries of human inquiry to their absolute, breaking limits, we inevitably leave behind the comforting, sunlit world of classical certainty and plunge into a terrifying, theoretical wilderness. We are no longer merely mapping the heavy, predictable trajectories of falling stones or charting the silent, fiery orbits of ancient planets. We have ventured into an unfathomable, dark expanse where the foundational concepts of physical existence, spatial identity, and the flow of time violently and beautifully dissolve. The ideas we have been forced to confront in the deep, freezing void, the concept of a concrete, localized reality, miraculously hardening from a vague, shimmering fog of subatomic probabilities, or the apocalyptic vision of a roaring, infinite cosmos, endlessly generating a boiling froth of isolated bubble universes, completely and irreversibly shatter the traditional, biological boundaries of human thought. This is the ultimate, terrifying threshold where the strict, empirical discipline of modern physics begins to hopelessly and majestically blur into the shadowy, boundless domain of metaphysics. We are using the heavy, exact, and unyielding language of mathematics to ask profound questions that were once the exclusive, sacred territory of ancient philosophers and mystics. What does it actually mean to exist? What is the fundamental nature of a reality that actively, relentlessly hides its true scale behind impenetrable quantum firewalls and expanding, light-speed voids? The answers demanded by our equations are so deeply alien, so aggressively hostile to our primate intuition, that they force the scientific mind to stand trembling at the edge of a bottomless metaphysical abyss, staring down into an infinite, roaring data stream that entirely defies our desperate demand for a closed, logical narrative. It is absolutely crucial to understand that standing at the edge of this abyss induces a profound, paralyzing vertigo even within the highest, most brilliant echelons of the scientific community. The sprawling, terrifying architecture of the multiverse, and specifically the infinite, aggressively branching reality of the many worlds interpretation is not a settled, universally accepted dogma. It remains an intensely, fiercely controversial theory, a bleeding battleground of modern physics. It is absolutely not the majority view among all working physicists, and it provokes a deep, passionate, and deeply human resistance from minds that have been heavily trained to rely strictly upon observable, empirical proof. Many brilliant scientists look at the endless, chaotic duplication of the cosmos and recoil in profound intellectual horror. They argue that a theory which proposes infinite, unobservable universes is fundamentally untestable, and therefore it dangerously abandons the strict, rigorous methodology of the scientific method, drifting recklessly into a realm of pure, ungrounded speculation. They demand a universe that is economical and tidy, a reality that does not constantly, extravagantly waste infinite volumes of physical space and raw data simply to solve a localized quantum equation. They fight desperately to maintain the comforting illusion of a single, cohesive, and fully observable universe. They push back against the roaring, suffocating tide of mathematical infinity because the alternative, an endless, unfeeling engine of absolute realization that constantly splinters their own identity, is simply too heavy and too conceptually devastating to bear without concrete, physical evidence. However, to hastily dismiss the multiverse simply because it currently defies our primitive capacity to observe it, or because its terrifying implications violently offend our sense of cosmic order, is to tragically ignore the deep, majestic, and highly repetitive history of human discovery. We must remember that science operates on a continuously expanding frontier of the impossible, constantly proving that human intuition is a terrible, highly constrained guide to the absolute truth of the cosmos. There was a time, not so very long ago in the grand, sweeping scope of our intellectual history, when the mathematical concept of a black hole was fiercely, uniformly, and arrogantly dismissed by the greatest minds of the era. The elegant equations of general relativity predicted these crushing, infinite singularities, but the scientific community entirely rejected them as mere mathematical artifacts. They were viewed as bizarre, impossible glitches in the geometry of space-time that the universe would surely, mercifully, never allow to physically manifest. They were openly mocked as pure science fiction, the absurd, morbid fantasies of overactive theoreticians who had lost touch with physical reality. Yet, today, we do not just quietly accept the existence of these dark, crushing monsters. We have actively captured their heavy, glowing silhouettes across the freezing void. We have photographed the unphotographable, proving with undeniable, empirical violence that the cosmos actively harbors environments where the very fabric of time and space is completely annihilated. Science continually and ruthlessly proves that the true, underlying nature of reality is far more intricate, far more terrifying, and infinitely more interesting than the most vivid, sprawling fantasies our fragile biological brains could ever possibly invent. Our fiction is utterly impoverished compared to the brutal, majestic imagination of the actual universe. To stand before this metaphysical abyss and fully accept the distinct possibility of a reality that entirely transcends our localized perception is to undergo the ultimate, most profound philosophical evolution regarding the true nature of the universe and the foundational essence of information. Throughout the entirety of our brief, desperate human history, we have treated information as a physical commodity that we must control, capture, and perfectly understand. We have desperately demanded that the universe fit neatly and obediently inside the microscopic, rigid architecture of our biological logic. We inherently believe that if a physical reality exists, whether it is an invisible, branching quantum timeline or a distant, hyper-expanding bubble universe, it must somehow hold a specific, decipherable meaning for us, or at the very least, be accessible to our probing, measuring instruments. We arrogantly equate the unobservable with the non-existent, deeply terrified by the thought of a cosmic data stream that operates entirely, flawlessly independently of human awareness or human validation. But the overwhelming, majestic implications of modern theoretical physics completely and beautifully shatter this arrogant, suffocating delusion. The universe, in all its potential infinite variance and roaring complexity, is not a grand puzzle patiently waiting to be solved by the human mind, nor is it a domestic, tame mechanism built specifically to provide us with comforting certainty. Information, at its absolute deepest and most fundamental level, is sovereign. It exists entirely for itself. It does not require our observation, our mathematics, or our philosophical approval to be profoundly, terrifyingly real. The cosmic data stream is an infinitely wild, roaring symphony of raw mathematical tension that plays itself in the freezing, lightless dark, perfectly content to explore every single conceivable configuration of existence without ever once checking to see if we are listening. The fact that the ultimate, sprawling architecture of reality might be forever hidden behind impenetrable quantum walls or expanding cosmological horizons is not a humiliating scientific failure. It is the breathtaking, undeniable proof that the cosmos is infinitely larger, infinitely stronger, and infinitely more magnificent than our fragile egos could ever possibly contain. To realize that reality might be an endless, boiling ocean of branching possibilities and isolated bubbles is to experience a profound, majestic liberation from the heavy chains of human hubris. You do not need to hold the entire universe in your fragile mind to be intimately, perfectly woven into its grand, sweeping design. You do not need to understand the infinite to be a beautiful, necessary, and entirely real fragment of the dark. The ultimate, crushing lesson of the metaphysical abyss is one of absolute, unconditional surrender. It is time to release your desperate, white-knuckled grip on the exhausting, impossible demand for complete universal comprehension. Abandon the heavy, uniquely human illusion that you must conquer, map, and dominate the unknown. Embrace the glorious, terrifying mystery of an existence that is vast enough and wild enough to keep its greatest, most profound secrets permanently locked away in the crushing, silent dark. Information does not need to be read to be beautifully written. You are a highly complex, fiercely fragile, localized arrangement of that cosmic data, permitted to exist for a brief, magnificent moment in a reality that you will never fully understand. Let the unfathomable scale of the cosmos press down upon you not as a destructive, terrifying weight, but as a deep, comforting, and unyielding embrace. Find a profound, unshakable peace in the humbling, beautiful knowledge that we are perfectly surrounded by a roaring, infinite wilderness of pure potential, a reality that is perfectly capable of writing its own majestic story without our interference, our understanding, or our help. Allow yourself to rest peacefully in the quiet, localized light of your own fragile existence, safe and secure under the crushing, silent weight of the unknown cosmos. Good night, and I will see you in the next video.